Um, I'm here with my friend Charlie Lyons, who, if you don't know him, lived in Huntsville for how many years did you live here, Charlie?
6.5 years.
6.5 years as the pastor of Riverside Baptist Church, and I got to know him through our local pastors' gatherings, and he's a great guy. And he was actually supposed to come in and speak to us a couple weeks ago, but with the COVID situation, we decided to do an interview instead, and the interview fit really well with the topic for this week. So welcome, Charlie. About a year ago, Charlie, you transitioned out of your role. You were, at this point in time, kind of selling your house and getting ready to move. We were having a goodbye barbecue with the pastors and stuff like that.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about the ministry role that you went into and how God called you into that.
Right. So I serve with an organization, a group called Leading Influence. And as a whole, we provide chaplaincy or pastoral services to elected officials at various provincial legislatures across the country. And I serve as the Ontario chaplain for Leading Influence out of Queen's Park. There in Toronto, the Ontario legislature, and it's an honor to do that. It's amazing how God fits all of our stories together, and it's a kind of a perfect union, I guess I would say, of interests of mine. I've always sort of had my ear to the ground with provincial politics. There's just been something about that has lit up my inner nerd, you might say. And I have for a long time found myself coming alongside of those that don't always get support but need support, and that's taken various shapes and forms over my adult life, serving in various roles as a missionary and then a pastor and now a chaplain, to come alongside of those that need encouragement, but maybe they're not the first ones to be thought of needing encouragement, I guess I would say. And then just what I've known and experienced to be my spiritual giftedness of encouragement, exhortation, coming alongside of people to help them move, I guess, from where they are, hopefully closer to where God wants them to be. So we were extremely happy at Riverside. We loved almost every minute of our ministry there, and couldn't have imagined a better position to be in as a young pastor, a young man, a young husband, young father. The leadership team there just bent over backwards to ensure that I was doing really, really well at those roles first of all. I wasn't required to, be at every single meeting that was happening and at the church 4, 5, 6 nights a week or anything like that at all. It was just a wonderful situation. But as I've said from time to time since, when we sense the Lord is telling us to jump, our response ought to be, "How high, Lord?" And so we sensed the Lord telling us to jump. And so Lindsay and I held hands and we jumped off that cliff. That's for sure. It took a leap of faith. Sold our house, as you said, purchased here in Brantford is where we reside now. And on normal days, I take the train via rail from Brantford into the legislature. I'm generally in the building by about 9 o'clock in the morning, catch the 4:35 home, and my time is spent in the building over coffee and hallway conversations, lunch time in the cafeteria, sitting with an MPP or 2 or 3 or staffers. I host a weekly in-person gathering there. Not these days, of course, in person. It's turned virtual. But Thursday afternoons, I hang out with a group of staffers. Since the lockdown happened, I've initiated an online weekly chapel as well. So I've had as many as 7 MPPs in on that, and about 13 or 14 staffers as well. So chaplaincy is a ministry of presence, as they say. And so it's being there for them. And when you can't be there physically, you have to find ways to do that virtually. And so far, we've been able to do that.
Nice. So it's been almost a year. Anything surprise you about the role or about what you've seen coming out of the ministry?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest things, perhaps the biggest thing that I realized really early on is that we often equate, you see the politicians standing behind the podium, and we're seeing news conference after news conference these days, I know, daily or more. And we think of the person behind the podium as having some sort of almost celebrity status, where they're untouchable, where they're just this two-dimensional figure that we see on TV, or we read their tweets or their Facebook posts or whatever. And what surprised me is how much even this, I said earlier, this nerd who keeps his ear to the ground with provincial politics, it surprised me how much um, they're actual people. To just put it very, very simply, they're people. They're flesh and blood.
Like human?
They're Yeah, exactly. They're human
Wow.
beings.
I never thought
Um,
of politicians that way.
well, exactly. That's it hit me hard pretty early on, and I realized they share, any of the struggles that we do. Some of the conversations I've had have ranged from an elder parent with a terminal diagnosis, one member and their spouse have reached the age where they're launching their first child out of the nest, and so off to university they were going, and dealing with the emotions of that. And there are some that just have their own ongoing health concerns, and that kind of thing. So I think back to the days of when I was the one standing in the pulpit on Sunday morning, and I was looking out over the congregation at Riverside, and I'm thinking about all the things that are going on in people's lives as I'm preaching to them. And it's really no different as I enter that building there, at Queen's Park. I think of that building as my parish, so to speak, and then its occupants as my congregation, in a manner of speaking. So they're flesh and blood, body and spirit, made in the image of God, and they need support like any of the rest of us do.
Probably hard for some of our people to really buy, but I think it's probably right.
Yeah,
what are
yeah.
what are some of the unique needs? Like, so why don't they just get their own pastor, go to their own church? Like, what are the unique needs of people in this position that you're able to meet?
Yeah, so I've actually dealt with that specific topic. I had one member tell me early on in my time there that they appreciated the fact that I was there, that I was physically in the building, and they could have conversation with me, because they had pretty quickly realized early on in their role as a representative of a group of the public, that this one member says to me how he found it difficult to go home and to talk to his pastor the way he talks to me as a chaplain, because he said, the Thursday night typical small group setting is out for a guy like me, because I tried that and found that often on Friday mornings, the things that I talked about on Thursday night were being talked about in the grocery checkout aisle, at the school drop off, and the post office, you name it, kind of thing. So some of the soul care kind of things that would be facilitated in a small group, or in pastoral counseling, one-on-one kind of thing, it was hard, because it unfortunately would just get back into the constituency. So just the fact that there's somebody there like myself that's just an objective third party, ear to bend, just someone to dump on, as one of them said, someone, forgive me, but someone whom they can just verbally vomit on, was what one member said. It just makes all the difference for them, because it doesn't work the same way to do that with people back at home.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so clearly you went in. This wasn't a position that existed. There were
No.
chaplains in other legislatures, but this was a new field of ministry, and I imagine that there was some question about how open people would be to it. But it sounds like you have been met with a fair degree of openness.
Yeah, it's incredible to me how many doors have swung wide open without me pushing. Like that, I was one of my mandates from our leadership team is, as you can well imagine, is just don't push, right? It's taking those hallway conversations and turning them into lunchtime conversations, which turn into office conversations, which in some cases already in just the few short months I've been there have become very meaningful conversations. And there's a couple instances where meaningful feels like every time I talk to them, that meaningful conversation is about to become an eternal conversation. There's one staffer, an executive assistant to one of the members right now, where it feels like every time I talk to her, that's the conversation where she's actually going to go over the edge and actually give her life to Christ. And so we're there already, and it's just been such a short time. Yeah.
How much, like in terms of how many people that you're dealing with are already Christians, already believers, and how many are you just dealing with who might, maybe believe in God, but not have a lot of church connection?
Yeah, so it's often I find it surprising when I tell people that I know of, there are 20 to 25 members of provincial parliament that would name the name of Christ, that they would be considered Jesus followers. No question at all. Some are more vocal about it than others, and some tend to keep that a little bit more behind the scenes. But as I've gotten to know them and sort of keeping my finger on the pulse of who's who and what's what. So that's 1 in 5. There are 124 MPPs, 124 ridings across the province. If there's 25 of them, that's 1 in 5. So as I like to say, that's a good start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you also have a role to play with those who aren't yet Christians too, right? The people you're working with are across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it often starts with just a hallway conversation. I do my best to know as much as is publicly available. Just even from their constituency website, there's often a brief biographical blurb. They went to this school, they have this many kids, etc. So I kind of have that in my mental data bank as I walk through the hallways, and when I see one of them and strike up the conversation, there's 2 or 3 that come to mind really quickly that I met within the first few days of being there regularly, and it's gone from hallway conversation. Now I've sat in their offices, now multiple times, and have had some rather meaningful conversations. So it starts with just showing up. I think that's half the battle in just about any area of the Christian life, is just showing up and just knowing that you are the Lord's representative. And Queen's Park just happens to be that field of mission for me.
Right. Now, you have said that this is nonpartisan, but we all know that God favors a certain party, which is, of course, whatever party we voted for. And obviously, God couldn't be on the other side, right? What's been your experience with that? Like, are you working with people from both parties? Is there a party thing going on?
Yeah, well, I think, by and large, probably I'd say Joe and Jill Ontario forget that there's actually 5 different parties or systems that are involved, right? The Conservative, Liberal, NDP, the Greens, and then there's actually a small number of independents who sit in the chamber as well. And so, I often say that we assume, I think by and large, Christians assume that Jesus has a political favorite, a partisan favorite. And what we find in the scriptures is incredible to me. As you look at the spectrum of the different parties, we find actually biblical principles across that spectrum. And I know it at first it kind of seems like a bit of a foreign concept, but hear me out. So, you go to the pages of Genesis and the creation and that kind of thing, and God says to Adam and Eve early on, take care of the garden. And of course, the green, Team Green has espoused those principles and holds them very highly, right? So there's that within Team Green. Team Red is very inclusive. They say over and over again that if you want to be a part of our team, you can certainly do that. I even go so far as sometimes to use the biblical expression for them, whosoever will may come, is what Team Red says, right? Team Blue, we know that they are best known for, fiscal conservatism and, good, solid fiscal stewardship. We see that as a biblical principle. And then even Team Orange, there's nobody that's been more persistent and consistent in advocacy for the last, the least, and the lost in our society, right? And granted, they've come a long way from their church basement roots, no question. But the Apostle James talks about pure religion is taking care of the orphans and the widows and the least in our society. So, you go across the political spectrum and you see sort of echoes of Eden, you might say. And so, it's not so much about partisanship for me. Our organization is soundly nonpartisan and non-political, non-issue. We don't speak to those issues in any way publicly. And even in the one-on-ones from time to time, we may get a question like, well, what do you think about XYZ policy or issue? And, we do whatever we can to just kind of bring it back to the person and away from the policies. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a beautiful way of looking at politics that is pretty refreshing. I would say don't often hear people point out the positive in all the parties. So now you're doing this as your full-time job, your full-time ministry. How are you paid? Does the government chip in?
No, not at all. We're entirely supported and funded third party. Leading Influence, Charlie Lyons appears nowhere on anybody's budget line within Queen's Park. From day one, Leading Influence has chosen to make the decision to remain entirely privately funded. So you think about a church's missions budget, or we have a number of family units, couples. We have a few family foundations that have come alongside of us and that kind of thing to provide some of that ongoing, the more steady support number that would just, give a one-time thing, and say use that however it's best used and that kind of thing. But what that allows us to do, it provides missional clarity and ministry latitude. And so it allows us to be able to walk through anybody's door and name the name of Christ without fearing some reprisal or, having our wrist slapped because, you can't say this, you can't say that, right? Because, as the old saying goes, with shekels come shackles. So it is entirely privately funded, yeah.
Now, were you around when they used shekels? Is that...
I haven't been in ministry quite that long, no.
Okay. I thought you were a little younger than me, but anyway. Yeah. So I already told you this, but I'm thrilled to announce to our church that we are supporting Charlie as a church on a monthly basis, something that our generosity and service team talked about a few months ago. And so we're excited to announce that to everyone today, that we get to participate in the good work that God's doing through Charlie. But if individuals wanted to connect with you, pray for you, even wanted to support you, how could they do that? Where would they find your info?
Yeah, so I have a small mini page on the Leading Influence website, just simply leadinginfluence.com. We'll get you to our main page there, and then as every website has across the top, you can go directly to donate if you like. And then there's a section there that specifically lists out for chaplains, and there's a link you can click there that says Meet Charlie. And so again, leadinginfluence.com is kind of the hub where you can find all of that.
And if you click Meet Charlie, you have to go to their house, right? That's
we haven't quite yet made that made that the distinction. On the Meet Charlie page, there's a video there, and I'm in my suit and, hair all coiffed and all that kind of thing. But but no, it remains virtual still at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't have this. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I know that you're doing stuff with prayer too. If people wanted to get involved in the kind of prayer initiative that you're a part of, how does that work? How would they get connected with that?
Yeah, so again, that's all electronically based, virtually based. PrayOntario.ca will get them to the Pray Ontario Prayer Network page. The basic idea with that, when things are normal, again, we're talking outside the parameters of COVID and pandemic and all that kind of thing. All of our currently 5, soon to be 6, provincial prayer networks. Every province currently west of Quebec has a provincial prayer network, and in each province, daily, Monday to Friday, we send out a specific prayer. We just go through alphabetically by last name through each province's parliamentarians. And so in Ontario, every 124 weekdays we've gone through the list basically, and we have a team of writers in each province as well, that's headed up by a provincial prayer coordinator who assigns them several names, and then it's on that writer to get some information about how to pray for that member of provincial parliament in a knowledgeable way, and it's all entirely nonpartisan. Again, we're not praying for to praying this party out of power and that this party into power. It's none of that. It's a prayer of blessing, support, encouragement, and that God would oversee them, give them wisdom, surround them with people who are full of wisdom, and often even that person would come to know the Lord personally. Yeah,
that's awesome. Good. Well, just one other question. In terms of how much do we have to give in order for you to begin lobbying for us? What kind of numbers are we talking there?
I haven't had that question asked as directly as you just did, but there's a few that imply it, and always the answer, of course, is we remain soundly nonpartisan, non-political, and non-issue.
Not any number there.
There is no number.
I'm a pastor, so you know that the kind of numbers that we might be talking about aren't an option. So
right.
But yes, so it's been a joy to chat with you, and thanks for the work you're doing there. I am going to pray for you live on Sunday rather than recorded right now, because I just don't know if recorded prayers will work or not. So we'll say goodbye and know that on Sunday when we show this, I will move into praying for you at this point. So
thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share an update and to say thank you as close as it can be to being in person to you and the leadership team there, your stewardship committee for coming alongside of us. It's a joy to be able to serve in this way. It's a unique ministry, no question, and for people to come alongside of something that maybe they don't understand at first, but they begin to get and they begin to understand through opportunities like this. So thank you very much for doing this today.
Thank you.